Welcome back to Conversations That Matter. I'm your host, Ron Gray. We are back with new author and dad, Steve Adams from Louisville. I recently sat down with Steve and talked about his experience as a dad after divorce. In this episode of Conversations, Dr. Pete Buecker will join Steve and I to talk more about divorce and his experiences as a dad. And we'll get into the 8 principles Steve writes about in his new book. Welcome to Conversations. Welcome back to the conversation. We're going to give this another go. Steve Adams, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I am Ron Gray with Conversations That Matter, and we're talking to these fellows about a new book Steve has coming out. And it's Now What? A Divorced Dad's Guide to Parenting Excellence.
That's right.
It's a great manuscript. I've read it a couple of times, and not only for fathers or divorced fathers, but there's some principles in here that I think everybody should read. It's a good reminder to get back to the important things in life, and especially when there's kids involved.
Thank you.
So kudos to you. We got to have a conversation here before Pete joined us. So if the audience has not had a chance to listen to part 1, make sure you get in on that. But I want to bring Pete in and talk a little bit about his part in the book. I know you interviewed him and talked about his experience as a dad, as a divorced dad, and how you have made some major transitions in your career because of your
Putting it mildly, huh?
Yeah, to be a more present father. Yeah. So talk a little bit, Steve, about your relationship with Pete and the commonality that you all share around fatherhood and even the divorce component to that, and why you felt it was important for him to be part of your story.
Well, it was interesting years ago. I mean, weren't you just coming out of your divorce when we had met and we were just talking and the conversations just sitting there? Remember in part 1, I'd said that I'd made mental notes over the years and things, and a lot of that was conversations and just small things that he would say and some of the things that he was being confronted with and struggling with that I knew as soon as this thing really started to take off, and I really knew that we were going to have sufficient dialogue to put a book together. I'm thinking. I said, Pete Buecker, got to get Pete Buecker involved in this because we had kept in touch a few times over the years, and just through some social media and through some email and text and things like that. And he was a tremendous contributor to what I needed. He was that piece of the puzzle that validated so many things. That it's so common that people experience this, and Pete's a pretty humble guy. So I mean, I think I probably had to set my ego aside a little bit more than he did. I try to be more like him when it comes to humility and just very very gracious. It just took me a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But all kidding aside, he helped me more than he really knows, and I thank you for that because it was a big, it's a big dose of reality when you go through this. So to have kind of a sounding board, or if you know someone that's had some common experiences, good, bad, or whatever they may be, to share those was a big deal. So to bring him on and for him to graciously accept to meet with me and go through the interview process and be very unfiltered, for lack of a better word, and kind of give me the A through Z of what we needed was so important in this, and it made a big impact on this book.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a lot of vulnerability in his conversation with you too, and I think as we talked about before, a lot of that is difficult for people, especially men, whether you're a father or not, is to allow yourself to get into that space of acknowledging to yourself that I've been met with these challenges. Now, how am I going to handle them?
That's right.
I mean, you talked about ego a lot in the book and in our conversation, and to be vulnerable enough and willing to say to yourself, that's my biggest constraint, perhaps. So it was good to see that in your conversation with him. What's your story about fatherhood? I know you're a former orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah.
Very busy, high-level, demanding career. I know you wrote in the book a lot about you being on call a lot and having to find ways to take care of your daughters. You're a father of 2 girls, right?
2 girls.
And how old are they?
My oldest is about to turn 16, and my youngest is 12.
Wow. She'll be driving soon.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
With his son, right?
Yeah.
So back to your path. When did you decide that the choices you were making as a father and also relative to your career, that it really wasn't what you wanted for your girls and for your experience as a dad?
Yeah, I think early on, I think the unpredictability of the schedule, just the demanding lifestyle, I guess I want to preface this, and maybe one of the reasons why this book appealed to me so much is there's never been anything more important to me since becoming a father than being a father.
Yeah.
Priority number one was those kids, and maybe not for all the altruistic reasons like I would like to think. I just loved hanging out with them.
Mm-hmm.
I just loved being with them, and when the first child comes along, it's a huge shift. Like, everything starts to change. And then when my second one came along, I was in my career, and relatively early in my practice career, and just realizing how much stuff I was missing. It's one thing to come home at the end of a long day, and they were pretty little at the time. And like Steve said in the first part, you come home and they're in bed or getting ready for bed, and you hear about all the awesome things they did that day, and it's like, well, man, I want to be there for that.
Right.
And so watching on a video or hearing a story about it isn't the same as being there and seeing the look on their faces and giving them a big hug afterwards, and that kind of thing. So, really cherished those weekend times and really tried to carve out that one-on-one time for them when I could, or that me with the two of them time when I could, or my older daughter when I was in my fellowship, for instance. We were in Boston. I was working all the time. 5 days a week and half a day on Saturday every week, But I get home on Saturday, I'd scoop her up, and all right, we're going. We go to the aquarium, or we go to the museum, or we go to the bookstore. We go get donuts, whatever it took to have some time. So when I got divorced, my oldest was just getting ready to turn 6. They were 5 and 2, so they're pretty young.
Okay.
That's when we split anyway. It's a rude awakening. It's one thing to have an idea what that's going to be like. It's another thing to be faced with the reality of it. All of a sudden, here I am a surgeon trying to go to work in the mornings, and I'm like, oh, I gotta get them up and get their stuff together, get them fed, and get them delivered somewhere. I had to, change my schedule around to meet the days that we had agreed on, and really fought hard to get as much time with them as I could in a joint custody parenting schedule, with the constraints that I had in my schedule. And so trying to put my clinic days on days when I knew those ran long, my OR days, I knew how those would run, and so I just started planning everything around the time when I had my kids to give myself the best chance possible to be able to be with them. But the problem is of course, people come in when they come in. Yeah. And so
that had to have been brutal.
It's brutal. And, I make plans, and I would, a lot of times, I'm looking at my day, I'm looking at my schedule, I'm looking at how the schedule's running, and I'm making phone calls, and fortunately I have, my parents are local to Louisville where I live, and so I was able to lean on them quite a bit. But there are times where it's a real challenge, and, it doesn't help, even though you have people to help, it doesn't sort of assuage that feeling of, well, I just want to be with my kids.
Yeah, it doesn't fix the problem.
It doesn't fix the problem. It really doesn't. I mean, you try to accommodate their needs with someone else, but you're, the back of your mind, and I mean, you even made reference to it. I think you were in the doc's lounge some waiting on surgery, and you're thinking about, man, that wasn't the right thing to do. They're not by themselves.
Yeah. Well, the best alternative, obviously, are the grandparents.
Of course.
Or their mom,
but it still doesn't.
It's still not the time that you wanted with them.
No.
Well, getting back to your career path, it sounds like that was one of the biggest constraints to you being able to spend time with your daughters, especially from what I read in the book. Tell us about how that shift occurred, when that consciousness kind of came to you that I can't continue to do this if I'm going to raise daughters. And now you're in a different path. I mean, in my relationship with them and my desire for a relationship with them is a huge contributor to that. So my divorce was final in the summer of 2010. By the end of 2011,
So, a year and a half into it, I was kind of like, something's got to change. I want to be there for my kids. They're only going to be little once. I don't want to be that. I was getting pretty interested in other paths I was starting to follow with mindfulness and meditation and some of these things that I'm pretty heavy into now at the time. And, I was like and I had come across an article that I read that many people I think have looked at this point, but it's from The Guardian, and it's called The 5 Top Regrets of the Dying. And my takeaway from that was,
that's popular.
But people at the end of their life aren't sitting around going, I wished, one of the 5 is I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd let myself be happy. These big things that people, in my orthopedic, especially was oncology. So I was dealing a lot with people with, end of life conversations and issues. And so, nobody was sitting around going, I wish I had spent more time on Facebook. I really wish I had done a few extra cases here and there. And nobody's saying that. Everybody's saying, I wish I had more time with my kids. I wish I had more time with my kids when they were younger. I wish I had, I wish I had. And I'm like, I don't want to be an I wish I had. I want to do it now. And these kids are only little once. So 2 things. One, I want to get as much time with them as I can because they're amazing little humans. They're really awesome little people. Yeah. And then 2 is you realize, and I think as a father of daughters in particular, but I think anybody, you're setting an example for what a man is supposed to be in their life. And so every relationship, I knew that with my daughters, like every relationship they have with a guy, whether, friendship or significant other or whatever, was going to be based on my relationship with their relationship with me,
whether she's conscious of that or not.
Right. And so I'm like, well, and at the time, I'll be honest. At the time, like Steve has talked about very candidly in his sort of corporate life. The life I was living, the person I was at the time that the divorce happened. I'm like, that's not the kind of guy I want my daughters around. Yeah. I got to change. If I'm going to set the example, I've got to change. I've got to take responsibility. I got to do the work because, who is the man that I want to be? Who's the dad that I want to be? Who's, what is the person I want to put in this world, to really set them an example. So they were a huge influence on me and kind of getting my own act together, as well as kind of setting me on a career path. And to your question, around the end of 2011, I just said, okay, well, what are some other ways that I can go about doing what I want to do in the world and make, that's meaningful to me at the same time that gives me more time with them. And so that's where my sort of entrepreneurial spirit was born. So in 2012, I opened my own business, tried to make a transition, did that for a couple, 2.5 years. They were there with me at the business and they were sitting at the greeting desk and greeting people as they were coming in and had them kind of involved, and they, maybe much to their chagrin or to their liking, I've been taking them with me everywhere I go, in the hospital, on the weekends, and that kind of stuff. Because it's like, so you just capture what time you can. Yeah. But I really was influenced, and by the end of, so I kind of tried in different ways to transition over the next few years, but really by about the end of 2015, when my call schedule was just crazy, I was away a lot, and I was like, enough's enough. And so I found a way to transition myself to part-time, no call, just doing as much as I wanted to do in that world, while really spreading my entrepreneurial wings at the same time in a kind of a whole different direction. But my desire to be a stable force in their life and to not see the path, not go down the path I saw a lot of my friends and colleagues going, who many of them today would tell you, man, I wish I would have done that differently, and some of them don't see it that way, and you can always tell, like you guys talked about in the first, you can kind of tell, by the kids and the way they are, kind of which parents are around and which really aren't.
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't care, like you said earlier, kids don't care if you're a superstar basketball player or you're flipping houses or you're a banker.
When people get defensive of that, when you say that, they're like, oh yeah, but they don't care.
They just want you. They want time.
It's a learned behavior. As you get older, it's different. I mean, when when a kid gets older and starts having aspirations about colleges or sports, they may care. I mean, if the dad has some influence or maybe has some pull here or does this or kind of tailors them for a position or something like that when they get out of college, yeah, maybe it matters then. But when you're young and you're pulling the wagon around, they could care less if you're dumping garbage cans or if you're the CEO. That's a fact.
Right. Or they're running off to the ER while dad checks on somebody that broke their ankle.
Well,
As long as they're there with you.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, we haven't talked much about your new career path, and I find it relevant in this way. You're doing mind-body medicine, and you and I have talked about that before in a previous podcast. But I'm just kind of curious, how has that career path influenced your relationship with your daughters? I know you've made more time, but making time is not always the equivalent to being present, right?
Yes.
So how has that, because that mind-body medicine, you really drive home a lot, because I follow you on social media, and we have a personal relationship, so I get to have conversation with you about what you're doing. And a lot of what you're doing is built around being present and being mindful. So how has that influenced your relationship with your daughters?
Oh, I mean, it's changed everything. I was lucky.
I think it should be a forced class for every parent. Maybe.
There you go. That'd be awesome.
For every
mandate
human.
that.
Yeah, for every human, maybe.
But
I'll tell you, maybe to the point of this book, you know, and what Steve has talked about and is so passionate about. One of the most formative experiences I had, and I was fortunate that I had this very early. I was in my first apartment as a single dad. Kids were really little. And, you know, I'm working a busy career, I'm stressed, I'm tired. Of course, you're going through divorce, and the divorce was still going on at the time, so it's just life, you know, hitting me from every direction. And they were, you know, my oldest was probably 6, my youngest was probably 3 at the time. And they're just being little kids, right? They're just being rambunctious as hell and doing whatever they're doing. And I was at my wit's end, and I turned and I snapped at them. You know, I snapped at them. But when I snapped at him, I happened to be standing right in front of a mirror.
Oh, wow.
And I saw myself. And I saw the look on my face, and I said, I don't ever want my kids to see me that way again. Ever. I'm never going to be that guy. I never want them to look at me and see that look. And I can't say I've been 100% effective at that, but it's been in my head ever since. And so the importance of being present, the importance of understanding where I'm reaching my limit, that has nothing to do with them. And the importance
they're
of
little innocent creatures.
Yeah, they have no idea that what divorce is like, or what my career is like, or what stress. I mean, that's not. They just want their dad, and they're having a good time. And they're being little kids. And so the ability to self-regulate, the ability to be self-aware, to say, yeah, I'm reaching my. You know what, girls? I'll tell you what, you girls are doing awesome. I'm going to go in the other room for a minute. And just calm, you know, just kind of decompress a little bit, and then come back, you know.
And what a great instruction to have them witness. You know, if you're honest with them about, you know, Daddy didn't mean to yell at you. It's not about you. I wasn't my best, and then you go and really display that. That's powerful vulnerability.
Well, and it's very powerful that you still talk about it. You know that was a defining moment.
I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, it changed the way I parent. And I think the other thing too is I realized, because at the time I was going through some therapy and trying to figure myself out. And the other thing I realized too is, so that moment, and then this other piece has been really huge. And this is that I realized, and this is maybe a little different for everybody. I'm not saying this is everybody's thing. But for me, what I realized, because at that time I'm trying to figure out, you know, what kind of parent am I going to be? Because before it was a team concept, and as flawed as it was a team concept. So at this point, I'm like, well, I'm free to be whatever parent I want to be at this point. So what is that, right? That's a huge decision, and one that anybody watching this, whether you're divorced or not, has had to figure out, right? We go through that. We don't talk about it a whole lot, but we do it. So what I realized was, and the mindfulness stuff really, and the work I was doing on myself and all this stuff at the time, it really influenced this realization for me, which is, it's not my job to turn these two into who I want them to be. It's my job to provide them boundaries, standards, to give them some direction in life, and to set the lines and let them figure out who they are. And it was such a moment it was such an aha moment to say, oh, they're going to become, I want them to become the best version of whoever it is that they're on a path to be, right? And to do that, I have to let them have to explore and to figure things out, and to make mistakes and to fall down, and and not to be perfect. And then when to say, okay, yeah, and set those lines. And of course, more discipline is needed. But I was like, I think what I had seen, or what I have seen, of course, is a lot of people get really messed up because it's like they never get the freedom to just be who they are.
Yeah.
And so I think going that path with all the mindfulness and the things I was doing, I was finally discovering who I was. I was like, they have an opportunity at a very young age to really explore that and figure that out. And with some guidance and some boundaries and some direction and some helpful advice along the way, and yeah, you went a little bit out of bounds there, so let's bring you back in.
Really back in.
It really changed the way I saw them and their path and what my role was as a parent.
Well,
Yeah.
that's so powerful to me, because now my wheels are turning, because it's a great segue into really the meat of your book, and that is around these 8 priorities. I'm sorry, 8. What's the word I'm looking for?
Principles.
Principles. Yes. First one is priorities. the 8 principles, because I'm thinking, and you guys are dads, you can speak to this more than I, but practicing these 8 principles in front of your children, and even talking about these principles and talking about when you fail and how you redirect yourself so that you can be
What's
better.
a lifestyle?
Wow.
Yeah,
These principles
and I was
are
gonna
for
s-
everyone,
yeah,
not
and I
just
was-
fathers.
Right.
Right, and I was going to say,
Even they're for kids, because they're going to see you live these principles, and they're going to adopt them because they're seeing you live them. Just
Yeah.
like you stepped into the other room, you took a moment to breathe and gather yourself, and and make it right with your little girl. Those principles they're just going to be ingrained into those
Right.
children.
yeah, and I
Because
think,
you're
and Steve has said this too when we've talked about this book, is, and it's not even being perfect or even being 90% good at these things all the time, but it is important to pay attention.
It's not about being perfect; it's about being whole through these principles.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
No,
it's about
absolutely.
paying attention.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is paying attention. You can be there and not be there mentally.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can be present
Yeah.
and not be there. And they are so good at detecting that.
Well, we're going to get into that because there's a story you write about in the book I want to talk about when we get to that principle. But let's start from the top with priorities. Let's just kind of go through them and give a little synopsis of what your experience has been like. And Pete can jump in here around these principles and how you've applied them to your fatherhood. Priorities. I know we talked about this a little bit in our previous conversation, part 1, but sort of give us a recap of what priorities mean to you as far as a father, and how setting priorities can really influence your relationship with your kids.
Oh, it does. I had to reel it in. I was on that path of just the chase. The chase of closing the deal, and and very similar to Pete's scenario. I just, it was an epiphany. I just realized that I had to do something different. I had to do something better. I wanted to lead by example, but not the example that I had been setting, because
Yeah.
then it was just not as effective as I wanted it to be. With child rearing, and they become my focal point, to the point of where I'm just committed to making sure that I do. They didn't ask to be here. It's just, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but they didn't, and they're innocent children, and they're growing up into adults now, and I had a lot of decisions to make, because for so many years, I made reference to lifestyle a few minutes ago. This is my newfound lifestyle. My old lifestyle was home at 10 o'clock at night, even if it was a Thursday or Friday night, whatever. Back up at 5, back into the office, functions, speaking engagements, sales meetings, B&I meetings, anything that was available for me to get in there and find that sale. That's where I was. Kids were on the back burner. Still loved them, still cared. They were great. Everything was fine in my eyes, but I didn't realize how out of control that is for me. Now, some guys may look at this honestly and say, we're good.
What do you say to those guys that say,
And maybe even women
that say, well, I've got to make a living. I've got to give my children a better life than I had. And put that career or the financial return from that devotion to that career, I don't want to say in place of their kids or in front of their kids, but if it's taking time and presence with their kids, I might suggest that there's a real challenge there.
Well, look,
I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not a parent, but what do you say to those folks that say that to you?
Until you come to terms with
Yeah.
yourself, you're going to be in a state of denial, and your rebuttal is always going to be, I've got a career. I've worked so many years in this career. You think I'm just going to kind of sacrifice this? I've built, really do you,
That's your story, right?
Well,
but you did.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so did I. Things change. You can't put a price tag on freedom.
Yeah.
And with that freedom at that time is utilized, it doesn't do any good to make changes and then spend all your free time hanging out at happy hour.
Yeah.
My time is devoted to the kids. And, and some people may disagree with decisions that I've made, and that's okay. That is okay. It's worked well, and I'm really pleased with where my kids are now. And, I look back and ask myself, I think we talked about it in the first part, would they be where they are today if I had not made the decisions that I made? I can't answer that and be honest. I like to think that I've made a significant influence on the path that they're on.
Yeah.
And back to what Pete said a few minutes ago, I remember sitting down vividly down in the Highlands having dinner with my daughter right before she'd left for Western, and I told her, it's okay to struggle. Don't think that I'm paving the way and I'm spending all my time and I'm consumed and I'm doing everything for them, and I'm just being that role that I'm supposed to be as a father. Not in the office, not on a plane, not in a hotel. There's going to be times when that happens, and I get that, but just not as much as it was. I really had to reel things back in.
What do you say to fathers who say, well, we have nothing in common? There's nothing that I do that they want to do or they do that.
That's garbage.
BS.
That is garbage. You create that.
Yeah.
You find the things that's important to them, what they like to do. If it's playing a game of jacks on the sidewalk when they're little, or if it's kicking a ball around, or if it's playing dodgeball, if it's going fishing, if it's going kayaking, if it's playing video games, I could go on all night long.
You wrote in the book, find out what they like to do.
Don't make
develop an interest.
don't make excuses. That's the chicken shit way out.
Yeah.
Don't make excuses.
To this question and to the previous one, I think when you talk about priorities, if when I was first in this journey and somebody started talking to me about shifting my priorities, I would have written them off. Like, don't tell me what to do. I'm a grown ass man. I'm a practicing surgeon. Like, I don't need, But what really changed things, and I think what really spoke to me about this part of priorities is look at your world through your kids' eyes. What did they see? What do they want? Think about when you were a kid and your dad wasn't home or was home, or so I have friends whose dads died when they were young. Man, I would give anything to go outside and throw a ball with my dad, but he wasn't there. He was he wasn't even alive. And really, there was this moment where it's like anything is important to them. There was this moment a couple summers ago, 3 summers ago, I guess now, and I was cleaning a bunch of stuff out, and a bunch of my stuff from when my girls were little, and I was getting all sentimental about it. My younger one was helping me, and I just said, I am sorry for any time I told you no when you wanted to do something. And she just looked at me as point blank, and she's about 9 years old at the time. She point blank looked me in the face and said, it's okay. She goes, because I know you gave me what you could,
Yeah.
And it was like those moments of playing like the little ladybug game, or like reading them stories at night before they went to bed. Like those little things that you just sort of go, God, if I have to read another story, I'm just gonna pull my eyes out. But that's what matters to them. It doesn't matter. Like, you can find anything to have in common, especially nowadays, the apps and games and video games and board games and show them some crazy card trick you learned when you were a kid. Anything. They think it's gold because you're their hero.
And it comes back to what he said, to kind of go segue from his. It depends on how bad you want it. How bad do you want to cultivate a relationship with your kids? And we talk about it in the book a little bit about the days you don't feel like getting out of bed. You're so tired, but you get up and push on. Same thing with playing the games. Same thing. if I have to read one more book, I'm going to rip it in half and catch it on fire. Push through. Stop making excuses. You can make
Make it about
progress.
them.
Absolutely, it is. It's all about them. You can make excuses or you can make progress, but you can't make both.
Yeah.
So you got decisions to make.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
I'm not a dad, but I'm a very active uncle, and my oldest nephew lives with me and works for me, and my youngest niece is 4 miles down the road. I built this place in the country. I'm glad you guys are in my home, and this is the first conversation with the conversations that matter we've had here. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
But I built this place so I could be 4 miles down the road because she's at the time she was 7 when I closed, 5 and 6 when I started talking about doing it, because I knew, you know, she's only going to be 7, 8, 9, 10 one time.
That's right.
And I'm really close to my sister, so I knew that I had to capture the moments now as an uncle. And that's why these principles were so applicable to me in my life.
And they will be because of your relationship, with them.
And you know, and we all get caught up in the, you know, being present and not present. And there's some things in here that was tough love for me. Just making sure that, you know, she's got a great dad. I'm not a replacement for her dad. He's a fantastic guy. And she's a daddy's girl. But, you know, she loves to spend time with me too, and I'm really honored by that. But some of these things here just shook me and reminded me, look, if you want to be the best, whatever, dad, uncle, friend, aunt, whatever, you got to be present. You got to capture the time now, because there are only going to be 10, 12, one time.
That's right.
And this was a great reminder, great pullback for me even. So I'm going to really encourage my friends to get a copy and read it.
Good.
Thanks for joining part 2 of my conversation with Steve Adams and special guest Dr. Pete Buecker. Join us next time for part 3, where we'll close out our conversation with Steve on the 8 principles of Now What? A Divorced Dad's Guide to Parenting Excellence.